One of the hardest things for new players to do in Rainbow Six Siege is to consistently win their gunfights. This is because the skill gap in Siege is through the roof, and there is a lot to be learned outside of just mechanical skill to be consistent. So in today's video, I'll be trying to help you with just that by giving you 13 tips that will instantly help you win more gunfights. So let's go ahead and get into the tips. Now, the first and probably the most obvious tip in this video is to warm up before every ranked session. This may seem obvious to a lot of you, but most new players don't do this. And it's something that single-handedly helped me to start playing better in Siege. Now, obviously T-Hunt has been removed recently, so the most common way to warm up is no longer available. So the way I recommend for anyone to warm up before a ranked session is to either do one of two things. You can do target drills, which is where you run around a map and shoot dummies in common power positions around the map, or you can do arcade. In my opinion, arcade is a much better warm-up because you're playing against actual players that shoot back, but target drill can be pretty useful too if you just want a quick and easy warm-up. If you play one arcade match or two training drills, and your aim should be on point for your future ranked games. Now, moving on to the second tip of the video, we have improving your mindset. Now, this involves a couple of things. The first of which is don't let dying or losing get to you. This is something that new players struggle with a lot, but if you let these two things bother you or get in your head, it will cause you to play worse. Winning a gunfight in Siege, in my opinion, is roughly 50% mechanical skill and 50% about your mindset. If you go into a ranked game or you go into a round with the thought process that you're going to lose or that the opponents you are up against are much better than you, then you won't win any gunfights because you're just going to put yourself down and cause yourself to make bad decisions. And this is something that new players I play with do all the time. They whiff one of their shots, or due to one of their bad decisions, they cause their team to lose the round, and then they let it get into their head and they start playing worse throughout the rest of the session. Trust me, if you start using these as a learning experience and you don't put yourself down about it, you'll start playing a lot better. Also, another thing attached to improving your mindset is don't play for kills. This kind of goes along with what I've already said, but if you're going into a ranked game with the thought process of having to get kills and kills being your top priority, then you're just going to be playing worse overall. In Siege, you want to play the objective, and playing for the objective will end up getting you kills. But if you start trying to run around the map like Bolo and trying to get as many kills as possible, you will end up throwing the game and also getting less kills because you're not going to be prepared. Now that we've discussed the two tips that revolve around things outside of mechanical skill, we can now discuss the first tip that revolves around improving your mechanical skill, and that is practice aiming head level. And one of the things that I'll see new players do all the time is that they'll peek an angle at leg level and they won't have their crosshair placed on the opponent's head. This causes them to end up dealing some damage to the opponent when they get in a gunfight, but the opponent will end up killing them because they just shoot them in the head. In Siege, improving your crosshair placement is one of the single biggest things you can do to improve your aim and to win more gunfight. Now, how do you practice head level? Well, I'd recommend practicing in the shooting range on dummies so that way you know the general area of where head level is, and you can also use barricades as a general guide as well. There's two buckles on a barricade, and the top buckle on the barricade is roughly around head level. So you can use this to your advantage in custom game if you want to practice aiming head level as well. But the simplest and easiest way to do it is just to spend a lot of time in the shooting range training against the dummies, so that way you can master the general area of where head level is at. Now, the fourth tip is something that I see players across all levels do, and it's something that you need to correct, and that is getting kill hungry. Now, what I mean by this is when a player starts doing well in a round, they get an opening spawn peak or they get a double kill at some point during the round, they'll then start playing extremely aggressive because they're confident in their abilities. This happens to players in Copper, and it even happens to players up in Champion as well. And it's something that will end up causing you to throw more rounds and also just get yourself killed a lot more often. In Siege, you want to keep a level head no matter what happens. If you start playing really well, you don't want that to affect the way you position yourself or the way you play the game. And the same thing goes for when you're not performing well, like I mentioned earlier. So just because you get a double or triple kill, that doesn't mean you need to start playing aggressive for the ace or anything like that, because that will in most cases cause you to die, and it could potentially even throw the game for your team. Now, move on to the fifth tip of the video. We have avoid taking gunfights without intel. This is something that new players do all the time, and you want to avoid it as much as possible. In Siege, you always want to try to take a gunfight when you have intel on where the opponent is. And the reason why you want to try to only take gunfights when you have intel is because if you don't have intel on the opponent, most of the time they're going to have the upper hand in the gunfight. This is why face checking rooms on attack without droning is such a terrible idea, because you'll have no idea where the defender is positioned and they'll be able to catch you off guard. So in Siege, if you're on the attack, take advantage of your drones and also your teammates' drones and try to play off the intel they give to you. And on the defense, try to use your traps or your cameras to provide you with intel that you can then use to take a gunfight. Now, there are situations where you will have to take gunfights without having intel, but generally you want to try to avoid that as much as possible. So if you have a drone or you have cameras or something that can help you gather intel, take advantage of it. And now the sixth tip goes hand in hand with this, and that is always pre-fire if you have intel on where the opponent is. This is something that newer players struggle with a lot. A lot of new players don't even understand what pre-firing is or really how to take advantage of it. And so I'll explain. Now, let's say you're defending on coastline and you're playing on the Cool Vibe stairs here as an example, and your teammate calls out that someone's about to walk up Cool Vibe stairs. This means that you have intel on where the opponent is. And a lot of the times your teammate will even end up yellow pinging them. So if your teammate has a camera on them and they call out where they are on Cool Vibe and they say they're pushing Cool Vibes, what you should do in this situation is you should ADS and you should pre-fire the staircase at the angle that they're peeking. So if they're coming up the staircase, you'd pre-fire the staircase to win the gunfight. Basically, pre-firing is just firing before you actually get over the angle. So that way you're already shooting before the opponent even has time to react. This applies to pretty much every angle in Siege. If your teammate calls out someone's pushing 90 on coastline and he pings their location, you can pre-fire that to stop them from being able to react to you swinging them. And this doesn't only apply to your teammates on cameras. If you hear audio of an attacker pushing you, pre-firing them can be smart because it can potentially get you a free kill. For example, if I'm in top white here and I hear someone inside a penthouse run into theater, I can pre-fire them through the wall to potentially get the kill without them even being able to shoot back at me. Using the sound intel that you get and also just the intel off the cameras around the map to pre-fire opponents and to get kills is something that's extremely important and that you should be taking advantage of. Now, the seventh tip, and the one that has helped me the most to win more gunfights in Siege, is learning to Shaiiko peek. Now, Shaiiko peeking looks something like this. I'm not the best player at it, and there are a lot of people that are better than me at Shaiiko peeking, but this is what Shaiiko peeking looks like. You're quick peeking an angle to get intel off of someone potentially sitting there, and then you're gonna pre-fire to kill them after you do the Shaiiko peek. Now, how does Shaiiko peeking work? Well, you lean in the direction you want to peek, you tap D, you then tap the Q button, and then you tap A. So basically you're tapping, you're leaning in one direction, you're tapping your movement key until you swing out, right? So you're tapping it, and then you're hitting your opposite lean key and your opposite movement key really quickly. So this is what it looks like when I do it. So you peek out to the location that you want to peek to, right? Let's say we're peeking here. You're then going to tap Q and tap A at the same time. And then you're going to click E and D again, so that way you can peek back out. And you just keep doing that over and over and over again. You go from tapping E and D to tapping Q and A. And this allows you to quick peek a doorway to gather intel on someone. So let's say I think someone's playing on vase. You're Shaiiko peeking it and you see them there, right? Let's say I see someone there. I can then pre-fire and kill them immediately after getting the info off the Shaiiko peek. Now, I'll link a video in the description that goes more in depth on how to Shaiiko peek, because I'm not really going to be going in depth on how to do it in this video, but it is still something that is worth learning and something that will help you win more fights. Now, the eighth tip that I'm going to be recommending you learn how to do is to isolate your gunfights. Now, what that means is in Siege, you only want to be taking a gunfight with one person at a time. You always want to put yourself in a position where only one attacker can take a gunfight with you at once. For example, let's say we're defending Basement Clubhouse. Our teammate gives us a call out that there's a guy upstairs in stock and he's going to secret, and there's a guy about to drop oil. Where would you want to position yourself in blue? Some people might want to position themselves behind this generator and hold this angle so that way they can kill the guy on the staircase, which wouldn't be horrible positioning. Some people would want to hold this angle so that way they can isolate the guy on the staircase. Or you could also position yourself close right here on blue. Now, when you position yourself on the generator here, this does allow you to see the staircase, but if the guy comes oil, you're gonna have to flick to him and it's gonna put yourself vulnerable to the guy coming down oil. That is why holding this angle on the staircase is a much stronger position, because you're not vulnerable to oil at all. Same thing applies to this angle. This isn't a bad decision either, because the guy on the stairs will have to walk all the way down to be able to swing you, and you can swing the guy on oil before he can do that. So if you're going to position yourself somewhere in blue in this hypothetical scenario, you'd want to either hold this angle so that way you can take the guy on the gunfight with the guy on the stairs first and then swing onto the guy on oil, or you'd want to position yourself close right here on oil so that way the guy on oil you can take the gunfight with as he walks in, and then you can move over and take the gunfight with the guy on the stairs. That's what I mean by isolating gunfight. Obviously, this is something that you're just gonna have to learn over time, but what you want to do is take all the info that your team is relaying to you and then ask yourself, how can I position myself in a way where only one guy can take a gunfight with me at once? And you want to put yourself in that spot. Now, the next topic I want to discuss is stop holding angle. A lot of players that are newer to Siege will just hold a default angle like this, and this is how they'll hold an angle on a doorway. And this is a terrible idea in Siege. The reason why holding an angle on a doorway like this is a bad idea is because in Siege, there's something called Peeker's Advantage. Now, Peeker's Advantage is something that's prevalent in pretty much every online FPS game out there, because on an online server, ping gives the person swinging an advantage and a faster time to react than the person holding the angle. So if someone swings you really quickly, like if you're playing on that doorway and I swing out on you, you're not going to have time to react to me, and I'm going to be able to kill you before you can even react. So holding an angle like this is never a good idea. So generally you want to position yourself in a way where you're the one taking the aggression and you're the one swinging out on the opponent, and they're not swinging out on you, because that'll give you the advantage in the gunfight. However, if you have to hold an angle in Siege, there is a way you can do that, and that is by holding a pixel angle. And this is how you should hold angles in Siege. If you're gonna hold an angle, you hold a tight angle like this so you can get the info on the attacker walking in, and then you can pre-fire him as he comes in. Or if he starts pre-firing you because he knows your position, you can just back up and wait for him to swing, and then you can swing as well. But generally in Siege, you don't want to be holding like a default angle like this, because it's just going to end up getting you killed in most situations. You always want to position yourself where you're leaning into the angle and you have a slight pixel peak on the guy. So that way when he walks across, you can swing out and pre-fire him as he walks across, which will give you the upper hand, because like I said, Peeker's Advantage is a real thing. Now, the 10th tip that will help you win more gunfights in Siege is something a little more advanced, and that is making a mental map in your head. Now, what I mean by this is in Siege, when you're playing around, you want to have a map inside of your head of what's going on inside the round. And what you want to do is piece together all the info that your team is giving you, whether it be positions of opponents, walls that have been breached, hatches that have been breached, pretty much everything that you know about what the attackers or defenders are doing, and you want to store that into your mind. And what you want to do is have a mental picture of what the map looks like and where all the attackers or defenders are positioned, so that way you can react off of that info. This is something that newer players will struggle with, and it will take a long time to learn, but as you start playing Siege more and more, you'll start getting better at it as you start learning the maps and as you start getting better at macro gameplay. Now, and the reason why this is so important is because if you have a mental image of what's going on the map in your head, you can position yourself perfectly to maximize your chances of winning a gunfight. If you know there's a guy on his own in bar upstairs, you can walk up and flank him and kill him, and you can potentially open up your team to getting a game-winning frag. These kind of situations are only possible if you're constantly taking the info that your team is giving you and storing it in your head and reacting off of it. And like I said, it's a lot to keep track of, and it can be very overwhelming, but if you learn how to do it and you get good at it, it will help you to win more gunfights. Now, the 11th tip that I'm going to recommend to you to win more gunfights is a hyper focus on audio. Siege is a very audio driven game, and you can learn a lot about where an opponent is or what an opponent is doing just based off of a few audio cues. For example, if you walk up on an opponent and you hear this sound, that means they've either crouched or uncrouched, and you can use that to your advantage by altering your crosshair position. If you hear someone go into the crouch, you can move your crosshairs down lower, so that way you can shoot them in the head as soon as they peek. And if you hear them uncrouch, you know that they're about to swing you and that you can pre-fire them at head level. This also applies to proning as well, which makes a really loud audio cue. And getting up out of the prone is even louder as well. So you can use that to your advantage to know when an opponent is proning and when they're not, so that way you can aim at that level. Additionally, this also applies to the flooring. Like, for example, if you hear someone in lounge, right? Let's say I'm the opponent in lounge that you're trying to kill, and you hear them in lounge and you hear this sound, you know they've just walked up the staircase and you know exactly where they are on the map. Different types of flooring on the map will change the way someone's footsteps sound, and they will help you pinpoint the exact location of where the opponent is, so that you can either position yourself in a way that you can take an advantageous gunfight on them, or that you can rotate and avoid the gunfight with them altogether. Speaking of audio, something that I never see new players do is mask the sound of their own audio. For example, let's say I take a gunfight with someone in bar, right? And they start to run up on me, and I want to catch them off guard. I can prone and shoot to cover the sound of me proning. That will make it nearly impossible for the opponent to hear me prone, and I can potentially catch them off guard by doing a prone angle. Another great use case of shooting to mask the sound of you doing something is when you're vaulting a window. You can shoot to mask the sound of you vaulting the window to potentially stop the defenders from knowing that you vaulted into the bomb site or something like that. You can also use that to your advantage when jumping off of something, because that will cover the sound of you dropping like a hatch or dropping over the rafters on Clubhouse, for example. Pretty much you can use the sound of you shooting to mask a lot of things in Siege. And now the final and 13th tip that I'm going to be showing you in this video that kind of goes hand in hand with that is being unpredictable. As I mentioned earlier in Siege, you want to be holding super tight pixel angles so that way you can swing out on people if they try to walk past the angle and stuff like that, which is obviously important. But another way that you can win gunfights and catch attackers off guard if you want to hold an angle is hold one in an unpredictable way. For example, let's say I'm a defender and I know that 2 attackers are in blue, right? And they're the only 2 attackers left. And me and my team are holding down the bomb site, and I know that the attackers have to walk through this doorway to go for the plant. One way that I can hold this angle and catch them off guard is by standing on top of it. If you're an attacker swinging this angle, you're probably going to be expecting the person to either be crouched behind the box, or you're going to expect them to be on top of the box. So you're going to swing this angle like this or like this. You're not going to swing the angle expecting head level all the way up here. So if you hold this angle like this, it will force the attackers to flick up to your head while you have the advantage of aiming at their head level. These kind of off angle positions can be found on a lot of maps, and you can use them to your advantage to potentially win gunfights that otherwise you wouldn't be able to. The same thing can apply to proning as well. If you can mask the sound of you going for a prone, and you can prone on an angle that the attackers won't be expecting, it can catch them off guard a lot of the time. But both of these scenarios are things that you want to resort to in desperate situations where you're down man count, or when you know that the attackers have to push into you. Those are the situations where you want to use these awkward offhand angles. Otherwise, you just want to play safe and kind of delay time. Anyways, that about wraps up today's video. Let me know if any of the tips in this video helped you out. And if you have more tips for beginners to help them win more gunfights, leave them in the comments down below because I'm sure they'd love to hear them. If you enjoyed today's video, I make Siege content just like this twice a week. So go subscribe to the channel and follow me on Twitter if you don't want to miss the next upload. Also, I started a second channel where I upload non-Siege content. So if that's something you're interested in, I'll leave a link in the description so you can go check it out. If you want to watch another video just like this one, a video will be popping up on your screen right now that I'm sure you'll enjoy. Also, if you want to watch a video from my second channel I mentioned, a video from that channel will be popping up on your screen right now as well. I'll see you next time, friends, and peace.